It's a really interesting conversation, but it lands us in Europe, and so I wanted to get your sense a little bit. We talked a lot about China. We talked about soft power influence in Africa, and you mentioned Russia, etc. But how do you think about Europe in the European Union? What role does Europe have in this definition or this conceptualization of development that you have, and how do we kind of, on what areas should we be competing, on what areas should we be collaborating, and or is it some kind of combination of the two that would land us in a more optimal place as a West
Well, I would say the
versus
first thing is the most important. I think Europe and the United States have a number of many shared interests, and I would say the first thing I would say is that we need to make sure that we work together to support Ukraine to defeat Russia in Ukraine. And second, we need to work together to rebuild Ukraine so that it is a member of the European Union, a successful democracy, and ultimately either a member of NATO or something like, a relationship that we have with Israel, where they get like the best weapons and they're so strong and they're so tough. Like, you never hear the Russians say, boy, I'd really like to invade Finland. And why is that, right? When's the last time you heard the Russians say, man, we're going to, they don't go around threatening the Finns, right? You don't hear them say that. They don't talk like that, right? There's a reason for that. So your listeners on your podcast will know that in the 1930s, the Finns basically it was extremely costly. So what we want is for the Russians at the end of this to say, man, that was, and I'm not trying to understate this or be too flippant about this, but I just think to keep it simple to say that we want the Russians to say, like, that was such a bad experience. I'm not invading you. I'm taking a break from invading Ukraine for 100 years. That they don't talk lightly about it, like, oh yeah, well, we're going to go and march on Kiev. And they say, well, how did that work out the last time? What we want them to do is be like, that was so horrible. I'm going to not you never hear them talk about saying, I want to do Finland, right? When's the last time you heard them say that? They don't do that. There's a reason for that, right? The Finns, and you know this, Johan, they have everyone's got to do military service. They have 500,000 people reserve. And okay, well, if, so I don't know, maybe that's not such a good idea. So what we want is for them to not be messed with ever again after this. We don't want the Ukrainians ever messed with ever again. And we should help them. So what can the U.S. and Europe do? One is to rebuild Ukraine in a way that follows the path of Romania, that follows the path of Poland, that follows the path of Slovakia. And that we should work towards a day where, Ukraine has a GNP per capita of $4,000 per capita pre-war. I want it to have $16,000 per capita like Poland. How do we get to that? We need to work towards that. That's a development goal. That's what we should aim for. We should have a Ukraine with the same GNP per capita Poland. Imagine what an awesome place that would be. What an awesome thing that would be. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we have a lot to do together in Africa. And I think that Africa is going to be a much bigger part of our collective futures. There's going to be 2 billion Africans, but we all need to collectively see Africa as a business opportunity and as a place to partner. What can we do together? We need to listen to Africans. We need to understand what their hopes and aspirations are, and we need to partner with them. This is not. This is an Africa that has an entire cohorts of amazing scientists, technocrats, and business leaders. Some have been trained and educated in the West. Some educated in Africa itself. I'm on the board of Ashesi University, which is a very prominent Ghanaian university. And so, we want to be, what we want is, I think we want to be a part of Africa's upside story. This is going to be a great, 54 African countries. We want to be a partner with Africa. And we want Africa to be a huge success, a multi-party democracy that buys and trades with the United States and is a partner of, and an exporter of food, an exporter of energy, an exporter of technology, an exporter of science and partnership. And, culture and, creative economies, there's amazing stuff. So I think we need to be collectively working in partnership with our friends in Africa on things that are important to Africa. The other thing we need to do is, if you are concerned about climate change on this podcast, you better love mining to the tips of your toes. I'll believe you believe in climate and you're worried about climate when you tell me how much you love mining. because we're going to have 40 times the amount of lithium and 40 times the amount of cobalt for all the electric vehicles and iPhones and Tesla stuff that we're going to need for this carbon transition. So you better love it. Decarbonization doesn't mean dematerialization. And I would argue that the aid agencies and the MDBs, like, if you said to me, like, okay, what gives, how many people become president of the World Bank working on mining? How do you become an I-level person, was not the term, or J? How do you become an I or a J, right? A VP working on mining? Anybody? No. We need to have a vice presidency for mining and minerals. Like, we're going to have to spend as much money and put as much attention on mining and minerals as we do on food. So until that happens, like, I believe that we're going to have like a lot of virtue signaling on this, but I believe that we need to have aid agencies are going to have to play an increasingly important role on mining and minerals and metals processing in ways that they haven't thought about before. And it's like a horrible topic. Oftentimes there's like all sorts of thorny headaches associated with it. Local communities, indigenous communities, environmental headaches, people not getting paid, local communities not getting their share of the money, corruption, security stuff. It is going to, and human rights issues, labor issues, horrible stuff. But if we're going to have a carbon transition, like, this is part of the price of paying the carbon transition. So aid agencies are going to have a really big role in this. But I'd say up until now, most people would rather get a root canal than talk about doing stuff on mining, minerals, and metals processing in the aid world. DFIs, they'll say, well, I have one project. Tell me how many projects at the World Bank they're doing on mining, minerals, or metals processing. Like 2? How many of the IFC doing? 1, 2? You guys tell me. Probably not much. So I'm not prepared to transfer dependence on oil from Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Venezuela for the People's Republic of China controlling like 40% of all the metals processing. I'm not up for that. And I bet most people, when they find out, aren't going to be up for that either. So we're going to have so Europe and the US have to work together on that. Up until now, like, we haven't fully gotten our act fully. We're not fully engaged. We're in, like, to use an American idiom, we're in the first or second inning on this, whereas we need to be in the 8th inning on this. We're way behind.